we would ask you just for our information to please comment in the chat box who is here. So I just saw a Judy and Juab there, and I know that Jeff's there. And so if you guys will comment on your names so that we have that for our records of who's attended the training, we would greatly appreciate that. You can do that in the chat box there. There's an Amy Stanley too there in Juab. So if you'll just type everybody's names in, your name, multiple names, into the chat box as we proceed, that'll just help us to keep a tally there. We would like to welcome you to the very first quarterly core leader training. We're very grateful that you're here joining us. Craig's sending me some information. Apparently, Craig's getting some private messages. So send it if you want to make sure to select everyone at the top there when you type in your names. Select everyone in the top there, and then we can save that information. That would be great. In the Zoom box at the top, Craig's the first one there, but if you go to everyone on the top and then type your name and information, that'll show up. Okay. Again, we'd like to thank you for joining us, for leading a successful 4-H club. As promised to you, we're going to try and keep this effective and short to be able to help you to train your volunteers on what we would like to see happening in a club. I'm very, very pleased to welcome Craig Dart, the Assistant Director of Utah 4-H, with us. You all know Craig, and we're very, very fortunate to have him here. One of the things that a lot of you may not know that I didn't know until I started working here is that Craig has been a part of the national committees that has created things like the essential elements of positive youth development and the Big M and those other things. He's been part of all of those, and it's been a pleasure to be able to have him as we've created this PowerPoint as well as the materials that will be sent to you following this, because he was right in there and knows the what and the how as to why it is that we do 4-H and what our overall encompassing goals are. And so without further ado, what I will do here is I'm going to share our screen. We're going to go through this. If, again, you have any comments, go ahead and send those into either the chat box here or go ahead and jump on with your microphone. We will go through this training for your information, and afterwards we're going to have a little bit of a sharing time. In our northern meeting, it was quite an interesting opportunity for people that had a lot of questions to put them out into the field and let some of our more experienced or people with certain expertise in those areas respond to help share and learn and participate regarding these clubs and some different ideas and experiences. And so we'll have that opportunity as well here at the end. But without further ado, we'll go right here into our presentation. To give you an idea of where we're going to go with this and to start, we're going to first touch on the essential elements in positive youth development. We'll then move into club and county 4-H leadership, and we'll touch on the club structure, informal versus formal meetings and different things that go along with the overall structure, and then ideas for club service. And so without further ado, we're going to turn the time over to Craig, and he's going to start us out here.
Okay. Sometimes in 4-H, as club leaders, we get caught up in the project areas. And 4-H doesn't become about positive youth development. It becomes about the saddle or the belt buckle or the state contest jacket. And we are more concerned sometimes with creating blue ribbons than we are with creating blue ribbon kids. So what we'd like to do to get started is to talk a little bit about positive youth development and why 4-H exists, and try to put what we do into the context of positive youth development. So as was mentioned, we are in the business of creating blue ribbon kids. And what I mean by that is we do what we do in 4-H so that someday these kids will grow. And as you can see on the screen there, the long-term goal is we want these kids to mature, and we want them to be contributing members of society. People that are going to contribute to our communities, contribute to society, and not be a burden. In the research field, we refer to this as the 6th C. And in order for us to obtain this long-term goal of the 6th C, what we need is we need to help kids with the 5 Cs. And this research comes out of Learner and a great big study they did back on 4-H kids, and it was released about a year and a half to 2 years ago. So what the research said is that if we take kids and we teach them these 5 short-term goals of competence, confidence, connection, character, and caring, that if kids possess those characteristics, they are indeed going to develop the 6th C, which is become contributing members of society. So that's really great. And I think that's pretty much like common sense. Who doesn't want a kid that's competent, that has a lot of skills? Who doesn't want a kid who has a lot of confidence and has connections with other people and has good character, moral values, and is caring? We all want that. It's kind of common sense. So in 4-H, what our research says from the Learner study, or excuse me, that's the 5 C's study, but that all derived from some research out of Eccles and Gutmann and what we call the essential elements of youth development. And what Eccles and Gutmann said is, if you want to develop those 5 C's, you need to put kids in healthy environments. And so the essential elements of youth development are all about environment. And specifically, we want to create environments where kids feel like they belong. And it's further broken down into what that means is that kids belong if there's a caring adult around, or if it's an inclusive environment. If you're not into rodeo, it's okay. If you're not into robotics, that's okay too. If you're into drama, awesome. If you're into whatever you're into, it's okay. And I think in 4-H we've done a good job of creating an inclusive environment, and it's okay to be you. Safe environments, emotionally and physically. That leads into mastery. Kids need to know they're good at something. And like I said, hopefully we're less concerned about blue ribbon projects, and we're recognizing blue ribbons as it relates to life skills, leadership, communication skills, friendship skills, responsibility, those types of things that are life skills that will last a whole lifetime. Which then leads to independence, and that is that kids know that they can make an influence in their experience, that we just don't do everything for them, but if they have an idea, we can help them make it a reality, and we give them choices to influence their experience. And then lastly, generosity. Kids need to put other people's needs in front of their own. So according to the research, if we create an environment where those big M essential elements are present, there is a higher likelihood that the kids are going to develop the 5 C's. If they've got the 5 C's, there's a high likelihood they're going to be a contributing member of society, so we all win. But what I'm going to share today is fairly new research, and that is a layer below the essential elements of youth development. And this comes out of Search Institute, and it's called the Developmental Relationship Framework. And this hits at each of us on a personal level. This is talking about the club leader level or the positive youth development leader level. And what this research says is that you can create a very good, healthy environment, but unless the kids build relationships with caring adults, it's not as effective. And so it's critical that kids build meaningful relationships with other people. And so this developmental relationship framework is really about personal characteristics that we need as positive youth development workers, or characteristics that we need as 4-H club leaders to be able to be effective in creating those awesome environments. And so Josh is going to send to you a handout that has all this information and an actual paper that was written by Search Institute that gives you a summary. But just really quickly, what these personal characteristics are is there are 5 of them. And it talks about expressing care, challenging growth, providing support, sharing power, and expanding possibilities. And just as an example, we'll look at the first one, and then you can read these others when you get them. But expressing care, what does that mean? How does that contribute to a great environment? And so what it says is, look, if you want to develop your personal characteristics to be effective, you need to be present with the kids. How often do we hold a club meeting or hold any type of 4-H meeting and our mind is somewhere else, like with all the chores that we have to do and all the budgets that we have to balance and all the reports we have to do? Are we truly present with the kids? Are we warm? Do kids like us? Does the vibe that we give off a welcoming vibe? And does our vibe tell the kids, hey, I like you? And we have a warm countenance as opposed to being a curmudgeon. Do we invest our time, effort, and energy really to the kids, or are we going through the motions? The kids can tell. They know. Do we show interest in the kids and what they're doing outside of the club? Do we know about their personal lives and their extracurricular activities, and do we recognize them for their accomplishments? And then the last one, under expressing care, are we dependable? Do we hold club meeting when we say we're going to hold club meeting? So these are just examples of personal ways of being that contribute to our relationship with the kids. And so we can go through each of these, but we won't. You can check out the handout on your own. But challenging growth, just quickly, do we inspire them? Do we stretch them? Providing support, do we encourage them? Do we model appropriate behavior? Sharing power, do we give them voice? Do we collaborate with them, or do we make all the decisions? And expanding possibilities, do we explore things and connect them to other caring adults outside of 4-H so that they can be successful? These characteristics are things that you have to develop on your own as a human being. But what the research is saying is, hey, if you're effective at having these personal characteristics, then the likelihood of you creating an environment with the essential elements is greater. And if we have a great environment, then it leads to the short-term goals of competence, character, caring, and connection, which ultimately leads to positive youth development or contributing members of society. So I like this depiction of the pyramid because we are the base. We as the club leaders, we are the base that makes the difference. So that's kind of some of the latest research. And once again, this information will be sent to you via email as a summary.
Okay, kind of shifting gears just a little bit is to establish what it is that we would define as county 4-H leadership. And so we can look at it at a club type of a level, and we can talk about our junior leaders. So these are youth that we would define as in 7th to 8th grade. They're volunteering to assist our adult leaders in leading clubs or activities or having responsibilities therein. Next, we can move up to a different level, which is our 9th through 12th grade leaders, who actually could serve as a leader of their own club. And this is something that I think is maybe a new idea. We tend to think that our adults are the ones that should be running this. I know down in Juab County when we were there, we tried to set some goals that would have it so that their teen council would be starting to run clubs and recruiting volunteers to be that adult that would assist them in the enrollment and leading of the club, which is a really neat idea. So something to think about as far as county 4-H leadership at a club level in 9th through 12th grade. Then we kind of can move on to our more county type level, where we have our junior teen councils, our teen councils, our county ambassadors, and tri-teams. Now, for your information, and we will have a link to this in the information that is sent out following this meeting, there is a leadership section within the Utah 4-H program guide found on our website that will instruct you on what a junior teen council, county ambassador program, etc. will look like and should look like, giving you guidelines of leadership roles and opportunities, how to set them up, how to run them, etc. And so we hope that you will look to those things and utilize them to provide greater leadership roles for those members that are coming from your clubs into your higher county leadership programs. And finally, the fourth here in our county leadership is our adult leaders. These are our volunteers and our parents who essentially make all of this happen and make things possible by utilizing their techniques and their expertise. One of the things that Craig mentioned to me the other day that it shouldn't have hit me as much as it did, but nevertheless it happened. He mentioned that there are different roles that our adult volunteers can take on. Now, as I read these roles, and even as I went around and I trained and visited with all of you, we talked about these different leadership role opportunities, but I never really put them into being together to work for one good cause. Case in point, I would define myself probably more as a project leader than an overall club leader or an assistant club leader or an activities leader. Nevertheless, I run a little ragged trying to make sure that all of the other things happen, like arranging meetings and setting up times and doing all those other things, rather than maybe just focusing solely on the things that I'm good at, which may be the project experience. And so what Craig started to talk about and to teach me was that there is a role for a club leader and assistant leader, and that volunteer is someone who serves as the liaison between the club and between you as 4-H staff. They're responsible to make sure the kids are enrolled. They coordinate meetings. They work with club officers and the other club leaders to operate a successful club. Then you bring in a project leader. Now, this is somebody who can work under the club leader, who can report to the club leader if needs be, or who the club leader can contact to come and teach educational programs with very specific project selected areas. Somebody that may have a talent in a certain area that's willing to share that with other youth would be an example. And finally, we have an activity leader. And this was the one that I got the most excited about. I thought as a club leader or a project leader, boy, it would be nice if maybe I could ask one of the parents that are already involved with our club, or even somebody else in the community, if they would join me to solely help to coordinate activities such as community service projects, citizenship activities, field trips, etc., to be able to have that responsibility to plan those out and oversee those different areas. I think that if we could present these three ideas to our volunteers, you would have volunteers that would be willing to recruit for themselves, maybe somebody else in a different type of one of these positions, to help to lessen their stress load, as well as to help to lessen their time constraints. I think that it would also help to function the club more effectively and efficiently to have these different roles spread out.
Not burn people out. So now let's change gears and talk about officers and youth leadership. Regardless of the level, whether it's a club or a junior teen council or a teen council or an ambassador program, the most common form of organizing the leadership is through officers. And so, as Josh mentioned, in our leadership program guide, there is a section that outlines the roles and responsibilities of officers, vice presidents, secretaries, treasurer, recreation leader. There's other positions, but it describes their roles and responsibilities generally. And so the resources in that leadership guide can be transferred across the board in whatever area you're working in. And so you should check that out online. The one that we really want to focus on is the one at the very bottom where it says others as deemed necessary by the club. And this is if you have a need and there's not a formal position, it might be a great idea to create some positions to give kids leadership opportunities. Josh is going to share an example of what happened in his little club and how he created a position for one particular young man.
So we have a young man in our club that really is, to every meeting, he's excited. Well, should be excited to be there. I don't know if he's excited to be there or not, but he comes to every meeting, would always sit in the back, very, very quiet. And he just kind of showed up and you didn't know if he was enjoying it, learning anything or whatnot. And it came down to where we decided we were going to try to create a position within our leadership responsibilities for somebody who could be in charge of creating the overall theme for our club for the year, which went along with the designing of the t-shirts, designing of our club sign for the fair, and all of those different areas. Now we pitched this idea to the club, said this is something that we would like to propose. What do you guys think? And then we sat there and said, now who would like to be in charge of this? And I was just about knocked over astonished when he immediately rose his hand as high as he could. Now this young man, he's rough and he's tough. He's a hunter. He likes to be involved in all of these different things. And so it was shocking to me that he would want to sign up to be the designer. Yet, nevertheless, he came up with one of the most hilarious and most effective ideas that we've had as a club as far as belonging and showcasing who we were. And that was to turn Duck Dynasty into Sheep Dynasty. And so you can imagine as they started to design, and I'll have to wear my shirt and show you as we go to some of our next meetings where we'll be, but you can imagine this amazing shirt that's got sheep on it that have beards and bandanas and camo, and our sign had cattails and and again, beards on these lambs and all sorts of amazing things that he came up with that made him feel like a leader, but also put a little bit more belonging into our club, because that made him feel a little bit more like home. And so what we would recommend here is that you find different responsibilities that are relevant that these kids can participate in. That, you know, it surprised me. I would have never thought that would have been something that he would have loved to have done. But you can imagine the boost of confidence and the friendship and camaraderie that he developed when those amazing shirts showed up and he could say, I did this. I created that, and the club rallied around him with cheers because it's amazing. We've actually had people that have seen me wear the shirt that come up and say, hey, could I order one of those? I mean, he did such a great job, and just an example of where our volunteers can take our clubs on the next level.
And once again, it's about positive youth development, and I think that kid is experiencing that in Josh's club. So just a few tips. Probably the most important tip that I have for you is that if you use officers in your club, it's critical that you as the adult leader meet with your presidency or your leadership prior to the actual club meeting. So with the ambassadors, I have the ambassadors run our meetings every time we have a meeting. And I assign someone to be in charge, or the president, if you will. And so they know that if it's their turn to be the, quote, president, that they have to call me in advance, and we go through the agenda from start to finish. We go over every single agenda item, and they, as the conductor, know the purpose of every agenda item. Is it to relay information? Is it to seek information? Is it to make decisions? And so that when that president or that ambassador is running the meeting, they know exactly what their role is and what the purpose of the agenda items are. So that's probably the most important tip, is to, as a club leader, meet with that presidency prior to the actual club. Also, it's not important that every child have an office. That's not necessary. And so if you're going to create positions or you're going to have officers, make sure that they are real jobs with real responsibilities. Make sure that it's not just a title only. So if you give them a job, make it real, and then hold them accountable for those types of things. The next thing is that with your presidency, you want to train them to make sure that they get others involved in the meeting, whether that's through having them, signing out the pledges, or having them fulfill the roll call. Go ahead and flip the slide there, Josh. And then if you have new clubs or younger clubs, we would suggest that you have the rotating officers. And we have those really cool club officer cards that are online under the club resources that you can download that say, okay, if you're the president, do this. If you're the vice president, do this. You can modify them. They're a Word document. You can make it fit your situation. And then you can change or rotate the officers on a weekly basis or a monthly basis and kind of assign them each month. My personal belief is that the way officers are most effective is once you establish a culture and a ritual of how a club operates. And so those cards are a good way to just kind of ease them into it, and then over time say, okay, you all know what the president does, you know what all the officers do, now we're going to formalize and select our officers. In the program guide under leadership, in addition to all the job responsibilities and roles and responsibilities, there is also a section on how to select or elect officers. It kind of gives you some guidelines on how to do that. So that's also a resource there. And then there is a separate work booklet for the secretary that's unique to the secretary. And then the last thing I want to say here is that if you use officers and it's a title only, it won't be effective. You need to make this a big deal, as I mentioned, with a specific job to do and hold them accountable. And one of the ways to help the kids understand the importance of their position is to hold a initiation.
They're in the conference room.
Whoops.
Yeah, it has your name on it.
Someone's microphone is on.
Like you and Craig signed it.
I think it's, who is that? Okay, I think we got him muted. Anyway, is to hold a initiation ceremony to say, hey, you are now the officers. And if you do a search online Under installation ceremonies of officers, there are funny ones, there are serious ones, there are in-between ones, there are the ones that are interactive, ones that are, there's lots of different ways to do this. I would just try to select one that is fun and will help the kids realize the importance of their new position.
So one of the things that we would recommend that you do to help your volunteers to understand once they've established these leader roles is to give them an idea of what a structured program would look like. We know that we try our very best to get out dates and information to you so that you can plan your events around the state events every year, and our volunteers and our youth and their parents have the same wants and desires in comparison to what it is that they're planning as a club versus their other activities so that they can plan around those. So what we would recommend for the volunteers is they sit down with their presidency and they create a club calendar that would have different options, service projects, citizenship activities, plans for club talks and demonstrations during club meetings. This is something that I've thought about that would be amazing to implement into our club that we do not currently do, to give kids an opportunity to demonstrate and practice for future county fair or county contest competitions. We suggest that you have a portfolio meeting where the youth come together and you plan at the beginning what it is that you're going to do. Perhaps there's some more leadership responsibilities that can be given to members of your club regarding portfolios and the information that would go within them. The other thing would be to influence the youth to understand why we do the portfolios and the benefits that come from them, like future scholarship applications and or college admittance applications, or simply just the understanding of how a portfolio runs to be able to help them with future skills. One of the things that I think that was the most important that we've listed here is the idea to select 2 or more projects. One of the things that was mentioned as Craig and I were preparing this is Craig said, what if you have 2 projects? It adds variety to the club and it brings in some different areas. One of the things that a lot of you in the county have mentioned is that you have this desire to continue and have longer lasting clubs. As I thought about this, I thought about how I've talked with some of our youth in our club who have expressed interest in shooting sports, and they've expressed interest in hunting and expressed interest in poultry. These are some different areas that we as a club could sit down together at the beginning and be able to plan out so that we could move from lambs onto the other. Now, not everyone may be interested in continuing on to do those things, yet that would give us, I believe, more leadership opportunities as well as more variety to keep our club exciting and moving forward.
So regardless of the structure, when we look at these club meetings or teen council meetings, your typical meeting is going to have these 4 general areas. And that is, when I was talking about culture, these are kind of the 4 major things that happen in these club meetings. There's some sort of opening ceremony that has some ritualization with pledges and roll call and things like that, introduction of guests, etc. That's then followed by a business meeting, which would include committee reports or decisions that need to be made by the club of which t-shirt are we going to do, what's the activity, etc. Followed by the educational program that might be a project area or a team building program or whatever it is that you're doing from an educational standpoint, followed by some social time or recreation time. All club meetings don't have all 4. It really varies from time to time. And Josh is going to talk about some specific formats. And Josh mentioned the 2 different agendas in the secretary book.
So formal versus informal is what I really want to talk about with our 4-H club meeting agendas. We would recommend that our volunteers be trained that once a month they should have a formal club meeting that would follow this order here that's listed in front of you: the call to order, pledge of allegiance, roll call, introduction of visitors, minutes, etc. Not only to be able to show our youth and educate them on formal meetings, but also to give our leadership roles more responsibility and the opportunity to act in their leadership role. But we also know that this is not always going to be plausible. We're not going to be able to make this happen every meeting every time. And so we move into more of an informal setting, and it happens a lot, unfortunately, in our meetings in my current club, where we'll have the call to order, we'll have our pledges, but we may go right into the club program because perhaps we've invited someone who has traveled a long distance to come and showcase a certain type of skill that they may have to teach the youth. And so in effort to move things along, we might bounce around a little bit. Nevertheless, I think it's really important that we're informing our volunteers that this is what a club meeting should look like, and the why as to why we do that. So that, again, as I mentioned before, youth have that responsibility, they have that leadership opportunity, and then they have that knowledge. So when they become future contributors to society and they sit in a planning commission meeting or a town council meeting or an office meeting, they are well aware of how things run, and they're able to gain the necessary skills that are there for them to accomplish whatever it is that they're doing. And so again, we would just point out, give them that training and that information so that they can recognize the difference between the formal and the informal, and also so that's at the forefront of your officers' minds to keep that going.
So regardless of what you do, we just want to re-emphasize that 4-H is not school where we sit and listen, but in 4-H we learn by doing. And so regardless of what you do, we want to make sure that all of our club activities follow the experiential learning model of do, reflect, and apply, with a heavy emphasis on do. The next slide has a couple of examples of things that you do. For example, you do demonstrations. Let's not talk about public speaking and this is how you public speak, but rather let the kids do it by having demonstrations within your clubs. Don't talk about the kids of this is how you judge, make them judge. Like for example, in Josh's Little Sheep Club, they have a club show, and the purpose is to teach them how to show their animals and what the actual shows are like. You can do skill-a-thons, you can do quiz bowls, you can do field trips and tours, and have go places and have them exhibit, do an exhibit within your club, service projects. These are things that we're actually doing rather than talking about it. And then, of course, when you're out doing all of these amazing, wonderful, fun things, also make sure that you coordinate your activities around the county contests, which lead to state contests, which lead to regional contests and national contests and events.
And again, I would point out by these ideas, again, teach your volunteers that these are options. They might not be able to come up with them on their own, but just hearing, hey, demonstration or a show or a field trip, gosh, I never thought about going somewhere else, and having them be able to experience that by learning by doing. Expose these ideas to them so that their imaginations can take over and that they can have an idea as to what to choose to make their club more enhanced and better.
And they may need your assistance in how to do that. How to do demonstrations. That may provide other training opportunities for them.
Lastly, here we quickly wanted to emphasize the importance of service within the club. You noticed on the club calendar, we suggested there be 2 service opportunities per year. Now, one of the things I wanted to briefly mention was the difference between service learning and service projects. We had a service learning opportunity at state contests this last year that I hope you were able to be a part of. It's when we were able to bring in a lot of fabric and make blankets for youth and families who are at Primary Children's Hospital. What made this a service learning experience is a video was able to be shown and a speaker was able to stand up to explain how this service was going to affect and better the lives of those people that they were making those blankets for. It would have been easy to just get together even and say, oh, we're making these for Primary Children's. Yet it had much more of a deeper meaning and effect on the youth when they were able to see what it was that they were doing and see the families they were affecting and see how that was benefiting the lives of those that they were doing that for. And so we encourage you again to educate your volunteers when they go to do these opportunities to make it a service learning experience versus just a project. Okay, that concludes, let's see here. That concludes our slideshow. Craig, do you have anything else that you wanted to add?
No, I just think that, when we talk about 4-H and we talk about the sustainability of 4-H and why it's been around for 100 plus years, it's because of volunteers and the club model. And if you look at all the environments that we have, all the service delivery modes that we have in 4-H, the most impactful, the one that's most likely to help kids experience positive youth development is absolutely, without bar, the club level. And that's why clubs are so important, because they're sustainable, and that's where it happens. That's where the magic happens. So push for better clubs.
Well, Craig, we'd like to thank you for sharing this information and putting it together and being here with us today. Craig is actually down at the office, or out of the office, but because of this amazing Zoom meeting, he was able to join us and present this, so we'd like to thank him. In the final 10 minutes here, what we wanted to do was open up the opportunity for you to share and or ask questions concerning this topic and or any others that you might have questions on. In our northern meeting, we ended up having some newly hired people that are developing some new programs that had questions regarding this club structure and how they could better implement it into their programs. We were able to have some more advanced staff members that had the expertise in areas be able to answer a lot of their questions that I think was an amazing opportunity to share. And so we open the floor now. You can either use your microphone or look into the chat box, and I'll do my best to try and facilitate the conversation. But if you have something in regards to this that you would like to share that has been amazing, that has worked for you in training your volunteers or working with your youth, please jump on and share that experience. If you have questions on how you can make something happen or work, or even questions regarding some of the goals that we have set together that you're having trouble hurdling over and want to seek out the advice of your peers here, let's use this meeting to be able to do that. Again, we have just a little under 10 minutes, and so we'll try and keep the meeting to the true time as we had expressed, but please go ahead and we'll leave the floor open to you. I'll look again at the chat box or listen from the microphone, but please jump on and let's have a discussion. Okay, not all at once. Let me ask this question. Is there anybody out there that would be willing to share some techniques that you have established to perhaps train your volunteers if you've already started to do this, to be able to understand these important elements in club structures versus just signing up and being a leader and kind of winging it? Is there anything out there that you guys are doing that's established that you could share with the group to help them better understand some ideas that they could run with that could be used to implement this type of a quarterly training?
Josh, we typed in a couple of questions.
Thank you. I will read those. I apologize. Here I was sitting here waiting for this, and it turns out my scroll bar wasn't down. Operator error. Okay, Craig, by the way, wanted to say thanks to everyone. He's going to watch his son wrestle. He's a nervous mess right now. He does get nervous when he watches his son wrestle. From Sevier County, it says, I got kicked off my internet a couple times, so I apologize if you covered this. But can you give me a couple baby step tips for a staff member to introduce this to potential volunteers? So is there someone out there that's had some experience? What would you recommend that we do? I know we talked about some things in our trainings, But are there some answers that you might give them there, some baby step ideas to introduce this to potential volunteers and how you would see that being effective? Maybe share some things you've done that have worked and some that haven't worked. Come on, Jeff Banks. I know that you know the answer to that.
What was the question? We're talking about your county fair ideas for us. Tell me the question again.
Okay, the question is, can you give these guys some advice on how you can introduce these ideas, baby step ideas, they said, baby step advice to introducing this to potential volunteers. So we've got our volunteers established and they're potential people, or they are here, they're new. What is a good forum that you have used that's been successful to be able to introduce this information to them and not give them a fire hose effect?
I think one of the keys that you have to do is get to know your leaders, who they are, a little bit about their background, because some of them might be able to handle a fire hose at one time, and some of them are pretty nervous. So to me, one of the keys through the years, since I've been on for longer than some of you have been probably alive, hi Josh, almost, I think right when you first come in, get to know who your leaders are, who you're dealing with, and then adjust your program, your approach to meet their kind of individual needs.
Thank you so much. Is there anybody that has anything to add to that from some of the other counties? Is there something that you've been able to utilize that has worked to establish that for our newer volunteers? Okay, thank you so much for that help. Moving on, we have a question about the presidency tags that Craig mentioned in the presentation. I will find those, and when I send that out to you, I will give that to you. I know they're on the website, but I've got so many things open here trying to run this meeting that I can't find them. So they are on the website. They're called, I'll tell you what they're called. They're called club officer cards. So the club officer cards are what you'll be looking for. And like I said, I will either send a link or attach those to this information when I send it out to you. Are there any further pressing questions? We have about 2 minutes. Anybody have any questions regarding the presentation? Any questions regarding something that you can do in your county to ask some of our experienced staff members out here, or anything that you want to share as far as success stories? Okay, well, if I could have everybody, please, if you have not, in the everyone section under our Zoom group chat, if you could please, if you haven't already, type your name so that I can get everybody that was in attendance in today's meeting. We will be sending out, it may not be today, but it'll be within the next day or so, hopefully the recording of this session, if we can make it happen. And then we will also be sending out all of the material. So that cool pyramid that Craig had created with all that really, really nice information that our volunteers could benefit from knowing. We have some literature on that we'll be sending out for you. We'll send this slideshow out for you. And hopefully this packaged material to help you to quickly turn around and be able to deliver that in all of your different areas. I sincerely express the gratitude to you for all that you do. I hope that we can utilize these trainings to make these things effective for our volunteers. Oh, we have one question before we finally end. We have one just pop up from you, Winna. They want to know, does anybody have any advice about how to get people to come to trainings? Any advice on how to get them to come to training? So last discussion question before we go. Food. UNF food is one of the main answers here. Bribe them with food. So we've got 2 food answers here.
Is it on?
Yeah.
Am I on there?
Yeah, you're
Hey, I'm on.
Yes, you're on.
It's funny that Susan said bribe them with food because that's what I was thinking. But on another note, it's hard to get them to come to you, so why not go to them? It's all about PR, how you relate, how you get to those volunteers. Go to them, ask them what they need to know, or bring them stuff that you think they don't know.
Okay, love that. I love the going to them idea. We have some other ideas. One is an activity for their children while they're in the training. So you say, hey, bring your kids. We'll let our teen council play with them and do whatever and have an activity so that you can come in while the training's happening. Love that. Thank you, Sevier County. We have another one that says, what about calling it a community cafe? This is from Erin. She says, the word volunteer might scare some people away. And we've talked about that in our trainings. Leader and volunteer sometimes scares people. If it's a community cafe or a training or they're helping or they're assisting, that helps them to come too. Somebody mentioned that they usually train their volunteers when they first get them one-on-one. So kind of in those new leader orientations, give them this information. But we would hope as well that we can maintain the machine by reminding them of everything. I know that even in working in this position, sometimes we'll forget, oh, shoot, and we'll be reminded in a training or something that we go and attend, and you go, oh, I need to be doing that. I forgot. And so I agree. I think that's maybe Millard County that made that comment. I absolutely agree. We've got to start them out. We got to train them first thing. But then those ideas of getting them in for additional trainings and having that interaction with them and letting them know that you care, you know, having a community cafe, giving children or an activity for their kids while they're in there, having food. Those are all great options. Thank you guys so much. Okay, if there are not any further pressing questions, I really appreciate all of you. Again, we will try and get this information out to you as soon as possible, as well as a save the date for our next and forthcoming meetings, which we will be talking about portfolios. So I appreciate everyone being here today. Look forward to seeing you soon. Have a very safe and happy weekend. Thank you so much.